Welcome to the LiveCast Conversations with. On this show, my guests and I explore the bumps and triumphs of their journey to extract the gems from their experiences, because success leaves clues, and today we turn those clues into billboards for you. I'm your host, Gene Bernier, founder of Pealed, speaker and co-active coach, guiding leaders to ruthlessly pursue a life worth living. Hey everybody, welcome to LiveCast Conversations with. This is episode 88, and on today's show, we have Greg Kettner on. Greg helps organizations increase their revenue, reduce turnover, and create a culture of mental health, mindfulness with the WorkHappy GamePlan. Greg empowers and inspires audiences around the world to be the very best they can be. His passionate stories will engage you, make you laugh, and touch a tender part of your heart too. He's also a world-class connector who's spent time with hockey icons Wayne Gretzky, shared the stage with comedian Robin Williams, and almost knocked over Queen Elizabeth herself. Greg, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Great. Thanks for having me, Gene. It's a pleasure to finally connect. I mean, we've been LinkedIn friends for a while through TC, and here we are. So thank you.
And that's the power of it is we were talking before we went on, like I connected with you through watching TC, who's the CEO of Men's Health, on your podcast, and I've just been following along with your journey of helping people work happy. So, yeah. And I'm sure at some point I'd love to hear the story about almost knocking the Queen over.
That's the number one request. Not Gretzky, not Robin Williams, but England.
So, Greg, tell us a little bit about like what led you to where you are now, like inspiring people to have these healthy cultures at work through this idea of the WorkHappy plan.
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of things, Gene. I've been in sales my whole life for 27 years. I worked myself up through the Western Hockey League and the NHL and Major League Soccer, doing sales, which I enjoyed. Always loved connecting, and obviously very outgoing personality. Just ask anybody who knows me. And one thing led to another. I had an opportunity. I was out with the boys one night, and we finished a couple of beers at one place, walking past another place, and they had an open mic for stand-up comedy. And I'd always been the guy who can make somebody laugh, but never would I go up in front and do that. I'm like, are you kidding? I always wanted to. And growing up, I listened to Robin Williams and Bill Cosby and all those guys. So we went in, and another couple of beers. I went up and I told a couple of stories, and I made people laugh. And it was such a rush. I just kept on going.
I can imagine.
And from there, I was probably about 6 months in to doing stand-up when I was in Vancouver. We were at an open mic, and halfway through my set, Robin Williams walked in.
The pressure.
Like, oh my God, here's my hero. He walked in, sat down, had a beer, and he started laughing at my jokes. I'm like, nobody's ever going to believe this story, right? Because there were people there. And so as I walked off the stage, I wanted to connect with them on a deeper level. And I thought, you know what, if I can make them laugh for real, like one-on-one, I've got it.
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to pretend I had no idea who he was. So I grabbed a beer, sat down beside him at the bar, and we just started chit-chatting. I asked him where he was from, what he was doing. He said he was working on a movie. I said, well, that sounds like a really cool career. Are you the camera guy? Are you in catering? And, he kind of looked at me like, why the hell does this skinny John Goodman have no idea who I am? So we started laughing. I said, you know what? I know who you are and whatnot. And he said, hey, you're funny. Keep doing what you're doing. And then he said something very profound. He said, he said, always keep making people laugh, because you'll never know the difference you make in someone's life by giving them the opportunity to laugh. And so from there, I had another opportunity to start doing stand-up comedy. I did it full-time for 6 years. And while I was on the road, I ran into an old college friend. We started dating. 4 years after that, got married, moved in. She had a daughter who was 8 at the time. Well, at the time when we started dating. When I moved in and we got married, she was 12. And then she lost her father to suicide. Rachel did. And this is a year in into our marriage. And so I'm trying to get used to being a husband and a stepdad, and then this monkey wrench was thrown in. And we learned a lot. A lot of us learned a lot, and thank goodness for good people, for therapy, and for talking about it. It's been very helpful, and Rachel's been very resilient, and we're fortunate to where everybody is now. So that happened, and then a year and a half later, COVID hit, and I lost my job. And I thought, man, this sucks. Like, why? Like, you know. And so I was talking with my wife, and she said, you know what? You now have the opportunity to do really what you want. She goes, you love
Oof.
people, you love making people happy. You're always positive. Why don't you help other people work happy? And I was like, brilliant, right? Like, as
Yeah.
guys, we can't come up with that stuff.
Like
Um,
sometimes we get so lost in the forest that we can't see or lost in the trees we can't see the forest, and someone's like,
exactly,
"Do you
right?
know that you're in this land of happiness?" Be like, "Oh, oh,
Yeah,
oh, is this what this
where
is? You mean other people don't feel like this?"
yeah. And so I started 18 months ago, just working with people, working with organizations on how do we work happy? How do we, go from stress to self care? How do we go from lonely to community? Because, we've all been on Zoom for the last few
Yeah,
years, and we've lost that water cooler. And how do we go from disengaged to productive? And so that's kind of been my journey. And it's 90% of the time it's been awesome. 10% has been a struggle.
yeah.
Some days, like, I'm always positive, I'm always happy, but there's been days during the pandemic where I'm just overwhelmed. I've
Oh,
just
yes.
had those days. I'm like, not another day. What am I going to do? And it's those days I really have to dig into what I talk about and
Yeah.
do self care. Get
Well, I
away
think it.
from the screen, get outside, go golf. Whatever it is for that. That's it for me. But you know,
Yeah.
for other people, it might be going to the spa or reading a book or go hiking.
It, yeah, it's like yeah, the golf or being outside is your thing, but like it doesn't matter like what is your thing that goes and fills your capacity, right? Like, I think I've had a lot of guests on the shows that have talked about that, and it's never a prescriptive thing about like this is the thing you should be doing. You should be out golfing because sometimes golfing can be just as stressful as being at home if anybody's ever taken the chance to go play.
Yeah,
But what is it that de-stresses it? And what I love about what you're saying is that 90/10 is like 90% of the time you're just like, man, I'm so connected to my values, to my why. This is what I'm hearing, that this is like such an easy thing. And then that 10% is like that's that test. That's where it's like the are you going to walk your talk?
yep,
And it's like, are you willing to get through this difficult 10% to get back on track with your 90?
yeah. And I think that's what's powerful too is when we can do that and do it even socially online and be vulnerable as well
Yeah.
too, right? When I can have conversations. I was just talking to another friend the other day. I don't know how many times I started, to my buddies. I'm like, I love you, man, or I'll just call up and say, how's your headspace doing, right? And they're like,
Yeah.
oh man, I'm struggling today, and we just have a conversation, right? And that's where it takes and just normalizing that conversation. So when people are struggling with their mental health or their family or their finances or whatnot, we can reach out, have conversations, and help each other out because forever we don't talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm going to catch it. You're not going to catch mental illness, you know. But cancer. Somebody has cancer. Everybody's like, oh, let's do a meal train. Let's go visit them.
Yeah.
Let's bring the cards and stuff. But it still seems like when people are like, oh, I'm dealing with anxiety or I'm bipolar or whatever it is, people are like, ooh, I don't know. I don't know how to approach it. But
Right.
just like anything else, how are you doing? How can I help?
Yeah, it's like coming in, checking in. A question I've been sending to some of my friends is like, "How's your internal weather?" It's just like it's a
Yeah,
check-in. It's like, I don't tell me about the stuff. I want to hear about the you. Like, how are you really doing? Because I
yeah,
care. And the thing that I really liked about your like phoning friends up and going, "Hey, man, I love you," is like,
yeah.
was that brave? It sounds weird to say, but like, were you always so brave just to be like, "Hey, buddy, I love you"? Like, I think I feel like this is something that's really come to the surface for men in the last like
Yeah.
5-10 years of going, yeah, you're my buddy. I do
Yeah.
freaking love you.
Yeah, right. No, it has. The first couple of times it felt weird, but now, like, and you and I hardly know each other, but you're going to be one of the guys. I'm going to check in. How's it
Yeah,
going? You know, and I'm not an expert in solving people who mental health have problems with. But
Yeah.
I can share our story, my story, and say, you know what about checking in with a coach or a counselor, right?
Yeah.
And there's no shame, and people are like, oh,
Gosh, no.
it's a sign of weakness. No,
Oh,
when
no.
we do reach out, it's strength, and for you and I, when we can go on social media and say, you know what, yesterday I had a shit day. It was
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but it went sideways. And finally at 2 o'clock, I said, okay, what do I tell other people to do? So I
Yeah.
shut it down. I took a nice long bath, read a book, jumped into bed took a nap for 2 hours, and I was
Yeah.
fine again.
Oh,
But you have to do that because how can I serve other people if I'm not good myself,
oh,
right? And
100% with that.
it's been a long time in coming to understand that. But the more
Yeah.
time, and I tell people we need to be selfish, and people are like, well, that's kind of a weird thing. But we need to take care of ourselves because if I'm not in the right frame of mind, I can't take care of my family, I
Yeah.
can't take care of my clients, and I can't take care of my friends unless,
Oh,
I'm in the right place.
yeah. Yeah, when I hear selfish, like, yeah, like, I think sometimes people have this weird, like, reaction to it. Be like, oh, that's a bad thing. Be like, well, self first. Like, what
Yeah,
do they tell you when I hear that? It's like, what do they tell you when you're on the airplane? If those masks come down, they're not like, go put it on everybody else. Be like,
yeah,
put it on yourself so you don't pass out, then go help others.
yeah,
And why? Because that is like, if it's good enough for when the plane's going down, be like, well, then it's good enough for when the metaphorical plane's going down in life too. Is like,
absolutely.
how do you help yourself so that you can go fill everybody else? Is like, um, if I talk about like filling your cup, and if you fill your cup, you can serve from your saucer. That's the overflow. Be like,
Yeah,
people get the overflow, and if you're giving that, then you're really out there from this place of serving. Be like, but if you're like draining everything out, like, that's a short term window. You may be able to do like what seems like a lot in a short period of time, but once that cup cracks, well, then you got to put the cup back together. Then you got to figure out how to fill it and everything else, and that's a long, long road to recovery, right?
absolutely. Yeah, and it's great to be in this space because every time I talk or work with people, I always have people telling me their stories. I was speaking at a ALSD conference in Las Vegas back in August, and we were the last. It was a panel, a mental health forum. So this is for it was a sports conference. I don't know. There must have been about 1,400 people there. But sports. I mean, we're macho. We sell hockey. We sell football. We
Yeah.
sell basketball. Who wants to talk about my touchy feelings? Like, oh, I'm having a rough day. But so at the very end of the conference, and there was a panel, Michelle and Brett and myself, and we just started out and said, you know what, this is a conversation. It's not a talk. It's not a training. It's let's share. And it went long. And people were like, hey, I gotta go. I got a plane to catch. That kind of stuff. But people were stepping up and having conversations. And I remember one gentleman. He said, you know what, I don't know how to talk about mental health. It's very weird and awkward for me. I said, me too, until 4 years
Yeah.
ago. I said, but all you need to do is just say, hey, I care. I heard what happened. I'm sorry. How can I help? And he
Yeah.
said, well, unfortunately, that guy is no longer working for me. I said, well, do you still keep in contact with him? And he said, yeah. And I said, I would just encourage you to send him a text or an email and saying, hey, I'm sorry. I know what you went through so many years ago. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to say something. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Um, and he followed up with me afterwards, and he said he did. And these two guys reconnected again. And the guy said, you know what? It's great. Thank you. But it's just having those conversations. Um,
Yeah.
that helps everybody. And then that was during the show, and then as I was walking back to my hotel room, this guy runs up to me. He's like, "Hey, thanks for talking about mental health in the workplace. Like we don't do it." And he started sharing his story, and he said, "You're the only person I've told this to, other than my counselor and my mom, but he had attempted to take his own life 2 months before.
Oof.
Just some stuff had gone sideways with his health and stuff, and that's where he was. And I said, thanks for sharing. He goes, I'd really appreciate it if it might sound weird to you, but can we check in once a month? And so once a month, Spencer and I, we text or call each other and see
Yeah.
how things are going. And it's
Oh,
it's been great for me, and I know it's been great for him too. But it's talking about it and being empathetic and loving other people, and away we go.
Yeah, like from that place of love, like so much is possible. Like somebody may hear that, be like, "Oh, is that woo woo?" Be like, "No, it's like right from here." Like
Yeah,
when you feel seen without having to back that. What I'm hearing from it is like you gave those people a space to be seen, to tell their stories with no judgment, no having
yeah,
to explain anything. Just be like, "I hear you. I get what you're and not even I get what you're saying. Just I hear you and I see you.
yeah,
Tell me more. I want to
yeah.
understand." And
Yeah,
just
and
like,
people ask as well too. Well, if I hear, somebody passed by suicide, what do you? I don't know what to say. Well, I didn't know what to say. You know, I got woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning on March 18th, and Becky's like, "We need to talk."
yeah.
And my first thought was like, "Oh, what did I do?" you know, and then she relayed the news to me, and I was just, I was in shock and disbelief, and so we spent the next 4 hours on the couch Googling how do you tell a 13-year-old that her dad's gone by suicide,
Yeah.
right? And we did all that. And fortunately, we have a friend here in town, Nikki Sharp, we talked to before Rachel woke up, and my brother's a psychologist as well too. So I woke him, got him out of bed. He's like, "This better be important." I'm like, "Oh, it is." Um, so we were able to talk to her, and it was really stressful on all of us, and there was a lot of
Yeah.
tears. But I remember that day after, in the afternoon, two families showed up. And Rachel had classmates with both these families. One showed up with flowers. They said, "We heard what happened. We're sorry. We don't know what to say." And we just
Yeah.
stood, on our porch and hugged. And that's all that needed to be said. We didn't know what to say back.
Yeah.
And the other family stopped by with a big bucket of vanilla ice cream and chocolate chip cookies. They're like, "We don't know what to say, but when we're sad, this is what we do," right? And I'll never forget
Love
that.
that.
And it wasn't profound, it wasn't earth
Yeah.
shattering, but we knew that both those families, that if we need to call or cry or whatever, they
Yeah.
were there for us.
Well, I think there's like I would say that is like some profound moments because they're like even through the what might feel like this awkwardness of going we don't know what to say, be like chocolates and cookies help us and you're loved and have some chocolate and cookies and
Yeah,
that it probably was a really profound moment for your entire family to go, okay, we're
yeah,
not alone. We're not
yeah.
alone. Like,
It almost like you were saying earlier, it gave us a space to breathe or to cry, and we didn't feel shame, we didn't feel sorry, oh, poor us or whatnot. It was
yeah,
just nice to know that we had people that were there for us, and whatever I felt, whatever we needed, they would have done.
right.
You know,
And it's probably true. And it's just nice to know that that's that option, right? Like,
yeah,
instead of like wondering who's going to show up, be like, oh, they did. And I now have, it's like a lifeline,
yeah,
right?
absolutely,
And I think it's the same thing when you talk about being up on stage. It's like you're throwing out lifelines to every single one of them. They may not all like reach out and be like, Greg, thanks. Here's my story. But like, you guarantee there's a number of them in the crowd that just went, I'm going to get through this. Like,
yeah,
it's just like a little like dangle of hope if you must. And sometimes people forget that that's all around us.
yeah. No, and I've got countless emails and or text messages or whatnot because I put my information up there, and people will reach out. I was just speaking to a group of Remax agents over in Everett, and after I gave my talk about the power of laughter and how we need to, you know, have more joy in work and talk about mental health from the top down and stuff.
Yeah.
After my talk, I was at the back of the room, and two people came up and said, "Thank you so much for talking about that. It needs to be talked about more." And then I got a message later that afternoon from a gal who was in the audience and said, "Thank you for reminding me to talk about mental health because 3 years ago I had to tell my two kids that their dad was gone by suicide." And this talk was a reminder that I need to tell that even more because
Yeah.
when we do it, it's not, you don't have to go out and preach it and everything like, hey, suicide awareness or mental health, whatever it is. But we all need to do a better job. And I think COVID has helped me anyway to be more grounded and to be more like, you know what, I love you, man, and not
Yeah.
worry what another dude's going to say. And if they think, well, that's kind of weird that he's saying that, that's on them, not on me.
Yeah, and that reminds me of like a John Gary Bishop part from his latest book where he talks about like saying "I love you" to his family, and they're like,
Yeah.
"What is happening with you?" And he's just like, "You don't get to cut out on me. Be like, I get to say I love you. If you're not ready to say it back or it's uncomfortable, you can work on that. But I frickin' love you." I believe he
Yeah.
used stronger words than that, but
Yeah.
uh, I
This is a
digress.
family show.
To a degree, and like it is really kind of, it's like it's nice to hear.
Yeah.
It's like, and I've noticed it within my own crew of people, like everyone's just saying I love you more,
Yeah.
and it's just like, you're important. I do love
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And another thing I started doing during the pandemic, and anybody can do this, it's really easy. It's just sending gratitude texts.
Oh,
Because, I was in the morning, I would write down three things that I'm grateful for, and at night, and then I figured, like, after a couple of weeks, I'm like, well, these are all the same things. And so I just thought, I'm going to send a gratitude text. And I did, and I felt really good. Sent it to my brother, and I said, hey, man, I really appreciate you being my big brother, blah, blah, blah. I love you. And then at the end of every gratitude text, I said, I appreciate you, to whoever
yeah,
did it. And I was speaking to a group of managers, and they run an organization that helps kids in need. So they're always, there's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure on them, and God bless them for what they do. And so I was doing this gratitude text exercise during my presentation, and not 30 seconds after this dude sent a text, his phone rang. He's like, "Dude, what do I do?" Like, it's the guy who sent a gratitude text. I'm like, "Answer it." And so we could only hear one side of the conversation, but you could just hear the joy in the guy's voice who had sent the
yeah.
text, right? And so afterwards, I asked him, I was like, "Who was it?" He goes, "Well, it's an old buddy. We stopped golfing about 5 years ago. We lost contact and blah, 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 but I still had his number." And he goes, "It's like we just picked up."
Oh,
And that's the power of sending a text saying, "I appreciate you.
yeah.
Thank you so much for what you mean to me." And, these guys are connected playing golf again. It's just, there's so much power in there and so much
Well,
connection.
yeah. I know, that's that power of the connection, and I think that also speaks to like how little the effort really needs to be. Right? I think sometimes getting started back with that, it can feel like, where do I begin? This is going to be a lot of work. Be like, hey, appreciate you, Greg.
Yeah,
Thanks for being here.
exactly.
And,
It's,
and who knows where it goes, right? From there, like,
yeah,
and I think that's the real insight, especially hearing that story. Is like, all it took was for him to pick up his phone and use his thumb to say,
yeah,
hey, appreciate you, just thinking about you. Miss our golf games.
yeah.
Whatever that message,
Caught up
some
in
form of that.
caught up 5 years in one text.
Yeah.
You know,
And then to be able to you to invite him to be like, answer the phone.
yeah, absolutely right. And it's cool, right? Because when I send them in the morning, I feel really good about myself, right? Because, like, oh, I did a good deed, and I know what it's going to do for that person.
Yeah.
And then when they read it, they obviously feel like, oh my God, it's Greg, and like a random. He's not asking for money. He's uh, but then when you get the feedback from them, they send a text back or a phone call comes out of it. It's just, you can't help but smile and be happy after
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah, it's just like Operation Smile. You're just sending it out, and the ripple effects I can imagine are,
Yeah,
or well, they're endless, right? Because then what happens when that person then goes off and sends,
yeah,
7 days worth of gratitude text?
yeah, yeah. No, I was working with a Skagit Valley YMCA over north of Seattle, and we did the exercise as well too. And I followed up with Dean later on, and I said, "So how are things going?" He goes, "Everybody's sending gratitude texts." Out of the 45 minutes, that is what they took away. And he
Yeah.
said the positivity and the happiness around the office is that much better because Susie's texting John and John's texting Sally and whoever else, right? So whether it's a client or a prospect, a friend like you, family,
Yeah.
even your kids. When was the last time, if you're watching this, when was the last time, like Gene said, when did you, last time you told your kid that you loved them?
Yeah.
Maybe it's 3 weeks, maybe it's 2 months, maybe hopefully it's only been an hour, right? But
Yeah.
I make the point of saying that to Rachel when she leaves it for school in the morning. Hey, Rachel, have a great day. I love you, right? And it doesn't resonate every morning, but there are other mornings when she steps her head back in the door and it's like, I love you too, Greg. See ya. Like,
Yeah.
it's $1 million day.
Oh yeah, 100%. And being teenagers, be like, I've got a few of them. I understand it doesn't always land well, and sometimes when you unroll the window while you're at school yelling it outside of your truck, I get great joy out of that. And maybe one day when they're adults, they'll see the humor in it too.
Is the joy from embarrassing them?
Watching them run, going, "Whose dad
Yeah.
is that?"
Who's that stranger? I don't know him. Yeah.
And the power of laughter is being shown here in the connection and embracing and empowering the conversation.
Yeah.
So so kind of bringing this back to being like you started this journey of the WorkHappy game book in
Yeah.
18 months ago. And
Yeah.
now you're off deploying it to like big conferences, and you've dropped some names. Those are not unsubstantial clients with a great amount of people. Like that in itself is like you said, your wife kind of said, "Hey,
Yeah.
go bring some happiness everywhere." What was it like going trying to find your 90% to be, "Oh my God, here's the thing. Let's go."
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing for me was just the fear of not knowing how it was going to be received.
Ooh.
Um, and I think that's a big block for a lot of us entrepreneurs. Like, okay, I have this idea, I want to go, but what if I fail? And then I was talking to my business coach, and he said, what if you succeed, right?
Yeah.
And my business has really shot up because I've gotten rid of that fear. I've talked to people, and they go, this is exactly what we need. And just the stories of goodwill. Another weird thing that I started doing during the pandemic, I started a group on Facebook called the Humor Lab because I wanted a way to get out there and still make people laugh, still make myself laugh. And so I put it together one night, sent it out to 20 of my buddies. It's PG-13, no politics. Um, Sent it out to 20 friends and said, hey, can you please forward this? I woke up the next morning, there was like 152 people in this group.
Oof.
And, I don't know what, 16, 17 months later, we're over 30,000.
Holy cow.
So every day, people are putting their brand of humor. It's not anything that I'm doing. It's a collective, and that's what I love about it, right?
Yeah.
You have dad jokes, you have puns, you have people that aren't funny, and you think, great, next. But I get so many comments from that. People are, I lost my job, I got sick with COVID, I went through a divorce. But every day, I'm going to the humor lab, and I'm laughing.
Oh.
And this as well as I do. When we laugh, it releases the endorphins, and that helps manage our stress. That helps manage our health. That helps our mental health as well. So
Yes.
that's been fun. Just being lighthearted, looking on the bright side is so cathartic for all of us.
Well, definitely. I don't think we had the Humor Lab in the show notes, so definitely while you're watching this, go to Facebook, check out the
Yeah,
Humor Lab group, go get your laugh on.
yeah, absolutely.
I'll be joining it right after the show.
I'll accept you. I won't
Like,
need you back
I know
in.
the guy.
Yeah, I know a guy who knows a guy.
But it is interesting when like things like the pandemic come. Like I remember, and it feels like a long time ago, like
Yeah.
2 Marches ago when this all shut down, sitting around talking with people going, you know what, everyone from CEOs to janitors are all feeling the same pinch. Like it's this is like once a century, once like in a very rare time that all walks of life feel the same pinch, and it like has this calling with it and be like, what are you gonna do from here?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and you're right. And no matter who I talk to in a group session, whether it's the CEO or the janitor or somebody else, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
We're all a little bit crazy, like my friend Eric Tuffy says, um, but we're better together. And I've seen so much good come out of this, out of connection and calls. And thank God for Zoom, right? Because if we didn't have that or StreamYard,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have been able to connect as well as we have. But I'm finding now after 2 years, I'm like, I miss getting a phone call. Right? It's all text, well, especially from the kid, or
Yeah.
but try picking up your phone and calling somebody. It's cool to hear a person's voice again.
It really is.
Yeah,
And wherever you are, being able to go out and like go out in person too. Like I'm starting to do that more.
yeah,
And I didn't realize that it was like a muscle, right? I like being out in public with people.
Yeah.
Sounds daunting. I don't remember how to do that.
We're socially awkward because we've been stunted for the last few years.
And and it's funny how that, like, yeah, like, been in front of this little screen. I've had 88, well, 89
Yeah.
conversations now just from this one show. Be like, but sometimes it doesn't just translate. Like, it's a different experience moving your environment too, right? And
Yeah.
I think if we circle back to the fear piece, is like holding the hand of that fear, and how do you get through that? So you'd mentioned that you got through the fear. Care to share what that experience was like, and what were the things that you had to do to face the fear and go, look, fear, it's okay, we're still going to move ahead?
Yeah. No, well, I think, my coach Craig was telling me you need to let space to think and ruminate about the fear. Why is it,
Mm.
right? Because typically it's something from something in our past. We failed at something before. Why would this be any different? That kind of thing. And just working on it, setting goals and getting out there and doing it. And one of the fears I've conquered, I've never even shared this. Well, I shared it with my wife, but I'll share it with you, Gene. Um,
It's just us. It's
Back when I was living in Vancouver, I was selling flooring online. So people go to the website, choose hardwood or laminate flooring that they wanted. We'd send them out samples, and then 3 days later, we'd have their name, number, and whatnot. We'd call them, try and sell them online, and we'd ship it out. Um, and I was in the office on a Saturday because we had a skeleton crew just to answer calls, like if somebody called in with issues or whatnot. We'd find out what the issue was and then figure it out Monday morning, right? Because the warehouse and everything was closed. One guy from New York called me up and just lit into me about he needed an extra box to finish his project that day, and he couldn't get it through, or I couldn't relay it through to him that the warehouses are closed. There's no managers here. I'm just taking phone calls, writing it down, and getting back on Monday morning.
yeah.
And he got to the point. He said, "You know what? If I get a flight, if I knew where you were, I would get on a plane. I would come find you and beat the shit out of you."
Whew.
And I was like, "I gotta go." So I took my
Yeah.
headset off, and I said a little bit too loud because I hadn't hung up. I was so flustered. I go, "This guy's an asshole." Right? I wasn't saying it to him. I was just in my
Yeah.
head. And so he called back and he's like, "Now I'm talking to your boss because he called me an asshole." I'm like, "No, I said you're being one." Right?
Yeah.
So, but ever since then, my phone rings. If I don't recognize the number for 3 or 4 years, I wouldn't answer it. I'd let it go to voicemail. I was scared of getting that same phone call.
Yeah.
Right? But now that I'm running my own business, I'm getting calls from all over the place, and I had to learn. And so I just said, "You know what? That was one instance 10 years
Mm.
ago. I can't let this. It's going to impede my business if I
Yeah.
can't follow up with people." So I sat down and I said, "All right, here's the situation. It was one guy. It was New York. Probably not going to happen again on the next phone call." And it hasn't. But that was one thing that took me a long time to get over, was the fear of picking up my own phone. But running your own business, you have to. I mean, I can't let everything go to the voicemail.
Yeah.
But it was thinking about it, ruminating on it, setting the goal like I'm going to answer my phone every time it rings, whether it's somebody that needs me or a robocall. And sometimes the robocalls are fun because they're like, "Hey, is this Greg Kettner?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, hold on, let me go get my credit card." They're like, "What?" And then I hang up on them. Probably doesn't make their day, but it makes mine. But yeah, that's just one example of fear. And I think that's what I would encourage everybody. We all have fears. We all have these triggers from the past,
Yeah.
but they can be overcome. And you know this as well. I mean, you're a business coach as well too, right? You talk to people all the time and help them out. But once we can get past that trigger, that fear, and saying, "Hey, this is okay. It might happen again." Obviously, he didn't know me. He
Yeah.
wasn't. He was upset at the situation. He
Yeah.
wasn't upset at me.
It just
Um,
happened to be the venting place that he was going with it, right? And it
yeah,
is interesting, like, and I imagine you've taken hundreds of calls, maybe thousands of calls between then and there, or had
yeah,
those, and still that one instant, just that one bad apple, like, just start to plant all these seeds of doubt and terror and fear. Be like, I don't want to feel like that. And then your body's just like, you're right, we don't want to feel like that. How do we protect you from that? Be like,
Yeah.
you don't answer that phone, Greg. You pick it up and it could be that guy calling to threaten to beat you up again. Be like, well, he was being an asshole. And that's okay because he's in New York, and if he's willing to pay that much money, well, I guess we're gonna have a different conversation. Chances are, no. And like I think that's that way of like flipping the script and telling the story back to that fear internally. Is like, how do you bring that laughter out from it? What's the other side of the coin of that story?
Yeah. And even talking it backwards, like you said, in my own head and out loud, it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, this is his problem. It's not mine.
Yeah.
I get to choose how I react, and obviously I reacted poorly at the time, but that was my gut instinct. I'm like, I'm not taking another phone call.
Yeah.
But here we are, and thanks for, I don't know why that came up today, but that's the first time I ever told that story.
Well, that's an exclusive here on the show,
Yeah.
so thank you so much for feeling like the bravery to share that story. And I think it's important because like we talked about earlier, like it's the little things, just like picking up the phone and sending that text. Be like, well, it can be the little things that set off those fears too, and be like, what's actually in here? Like, do we want to let those seeds really take root? And like that's that choice to face that fear. And the longer we let it sit there and whisper and get stronger, like typically the longer it takes to get rid of the damn thing too.
Yeah, no, exactly. But also too, I mean, we've known each other kind of sort of on LinkedIn, so I feel okay sharing that with you, right?
Yeah.
I'm being vulnerable. If it was somebody on the street, that probably wouldn't have been the first thing I would have told about the Queen of England.
walking down the street, tapping on the shoulder. Hey, have you heard about fear?
Right. And now because all our smartphones listen to us, I'm going to start getting calls from the 212, and I'm going to get triggered again.
Maybe that guy's listening. He'll be like, hey, Greg, saw that. Really sorry. I was having a bad day.
Yeah, my bad. Sorry. Exactly.
Well, now we got to hear the Queen of England story before we get.
Yeah,
we're actually almost at our 40-minute mark, and I want to be respectful of your time. But like, yes, it might not totally be on track about the workplay handbook, but like, it sounds like a hell of a story.
Yeah. No. So I was working for the Vancouver Canucks. We were part of the ticket sales team, and for every game there was one of us who was the runner. So if there's mislabeled tickets or people are on seats or issues, we'd run all over the stadium for the first two periods to get everything in order. And it was a preseason game against the San Jose Sharks. The Queen of England was in Vancouver for something, and so they had gotten her to come drop the puck for the official face-off at the beginning. So she had her own box and everything. And a couple of days before, some people from her entourage came to the sales team and said, "There's how you act with the Queen, right? You don't talk to her until she speaks to you, and guys bow and girls curtsy and you smile." And I was like, wow, this girl's high maintenance. But I mean, this was before. I think it was even before 9/11 as well too. Maybe it was right after. But so they had their security detail go over everything with us. So I went through the training and whatnot. I thought nothing of it. But that night we all had special badges on saying we work for the Canucks and stuff. And just I mean, we're dressed differently. We're all in our suits.
Yeah.
So I was the guy running around if there's issues. They dropped the puck. I watched that, and then I started doing my job and running up and down. And I was up on the fifth deck, and I had to run down to the box office because one of the season ticket holders couldn't get in. And so I ran to the elevators, and there was 3 elevators, and there were about 20 people standing in front of each elevator. I'm like, this is going to take forever. I'm never going to get down. So the stairs were right behind the elevators. I'm like, oh, just pile down the stairs. So I'm flying down these stairs, right, to get in halfway between the 3rd and 2nd level. I come flying around the corner. I'm like, oh my goodness gracious. And I looked up, and it was the Queen. And I mean, she was coming up and I was flying down, right? She would have like ran right into my stomach. And all of a sudden, who are you? What are you doing? And I'm like up back against the wall, like, I'm Greg. I work for the Canucks. I'm sorry, I'm trying to run down the stairs. And so she's like, it's okay. Nice to meet you. I said, nice to meet you, Queen. I did not do the protocol at all. I was so frustrated. And so I stood against the wall until they got up to the stairs and they took off and I went off. And That was my one and only chance encounter with the Queen of England.
And what a story.
Right?
She's probably still in Buckingham Tower. Like, that guy from the Canucks scared the living
John
bejesus
Goodman
out of
guy
me.
ran me over.
I love it. Well, thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
great. Well, Greg, like I said, we're at that 40-minute mark, and we got to where I expected and knew we would. So
Yeah.
before we move on to the last question of the show, let's give you a chance to let people know how they can connect with you. Aside from the Humor Lab, where else
Yeah,
can people find you?
absolutely. Probably the easiest is my website, which is gregkettner.com, or LinkedIn. I'm the only Greg Kettner that I know of as now. But if anybody has any questions on how do we talk about humor or work happy, use humor in the workplace appropriately, how do we normalize the conversation about mental health at work and at home, because they're both very important, they're both very tied together. So if you have any questions or I can help in any way connect, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be honored.
Oh, that's awesome. And as well, in the show notes down below, wherever you're watching this, you can find those links down there too.
Perfect.
All right. Before we let you go, I used to ask everybody, we would
Yep.
hop into the time machine, we'd go back 10 years, and you give your younger self a piece of advice. We're switching it up. It's still the same time machine, but it can go forward now. So we're going to go forward 10 years, meet your future self. When those doors open, what's the piece of advice he's going to give you?
That's a good question. I would probably say, other than, I mean, the fear still creeps in there. Don't be a prisoner of your own fears. But I think another thing that I would probably tell myself looking backwards is when you have an opportunity, figure it out and go do it. Don't, well, it's not for me, right? Say yes and then figure it out.
Oh,
Because
I
I
love
think
that.
there's a lot of opportunities that I've missed and before up until now that and I don't know if I have what I've missed out on or not, but I'm sure there have. Like
Yeah,
that's not me, or I don't feel like doing it. But if something comes along, say yes, figure it out, and serve people.
that one hits. I love that. I love that. Greg, thank you so much for being the guest on episode 88 today. To everybody else, thank you for watching. This is the Livecast Conversations with. I'm your host, Gene the Coactive Coach, and until next Wednesday, we'll see you then. Make
Great,
sure to send
thanks,
out some
Gene. I
gratitude texts,
appreciate it.
everybody.
I appreciate you, and I love you, man.
I appreciate you, and I love you now too as well, Greg. All
All right,
right. See you,
cheers.
everybody. We love you as well.
Likewise.